Someone tried to change the locks on my house while I was making coffee. They said it was legal. It wasn't. Rewind just a few minutes. Through the blinds I saw her, Victoria, Harlow. Emerald blazer pressed to perfection. Sunglasses perched like a crown. She pulled out a shiny master key and shoved it into my front door as if she'd misplaced her throne. When the key didn't fit, her lips twisted in annoyance. She dialed 911 without hesitation. Her voice dropped into a whisper laced with theater. "Yes, officer. There's a man inside my house. I believe he's refusing to leave." I didn't move. I didn't speak, because what she didn't know was that the dispatcher picking up her false report was my son. Before we dive into this wild ride of neighborhood drama, tell me, what country or city are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe in standing up against bullies and unchecked power, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories just like this. My name is David Miller. I'm 28 years old, and after 5 years serving in the Marines, all I wanted was peace. So I moved to a quiet suburban street called Maplewood Hollow, tree-lined, safe, predictable. A place where I could finally breathe. Bought a modest 2-bedroom house, planted some roses, mowed my own lawn, kept to myself. No noise complaints, no parties, no drama. But in this neighborhood, silence wasn't safety. It was surveillance. Because 2 doors down lived Victoria Harlow, 35, self-declared president of our HOA and neighborhood royalty, in her own mind. Always in that sharp emerald blazer, clipboard in hand, like a weapon, patrolling the sidewalks like a general. To her, rules weren't guidelines. They were gospel. And neighbors just pawns in her suburban fiefdom. I didn't know it yet, but by planting one simple rosebush, I'd just declared war on Victoria's empire. It started with a knock-sharp mechanical, like it came from someone used to being obeyed. I opened the door to see Victoria standing there, lips pressed into a thin, professional smile. She didn't say hello, just extended a printed violation notice like it was a court summons. "Mr. Miller, you're in breach of Section 4.7 of the Maplewood HOA Guidelines." I blinked. "Sorry." "The red roses in your yard," she said, pointing with the edge of her clipboard. "Only white or pale pink varieties are allowed in front-facing landscape areas. You have 48 hours to remove them or face a $200 fine." I stared at her. Was this real? I'd bought this house 6 months ago. No one ever mentioned anything about flower colors. Her smile didn't budge. "It's your responsibility to stay updated. We all got the email. I hadn't. And something in her eyes told me she knew that. That night, I dug through every document I had from the sale, no mention of rose restrictions. The next morning, she was back. Clipboard, blazer, smile. This time, she didn't bother knocking. She just stood on my lawn, arms crossed, surveying like a queen inspecting her kingdom. "Morning," she said, her tone flat. "Still haven't removed those roses. It'd be a shame if someone thought you were deliberately challenging the HOA. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning wrapped in passive-aggressive politeness." "You think this is about flowers?" I asked. She tilted her head. "No, Mr. Miller. It's about standards. Communities fall apart when people think the rules don't apply to them." She turned and walked off without another word. And just like that, I realized this wasn't about roses. This was about power, and I'd just been marked as a problem to eliminate. The next few days felt like surveillance. Every time I stepped outside, she was there pretending to walk her dog, pretending to check mail. Always watching. Tuesday, I got another citation. "Improper curbside vehicle storage," it read. My car had been parked on the street for 23 minutes while I unloaded groceries. Wednesday, she came with a tape measure. Yes, a literal measuring tape. She kneeled on my lawn like a forensic analyst. "Your grass is 1.75 inches tall," she announced. "Maximum is 1.5. I looked down. It was the same height as every lawn on the block. "Then maybe your neighbors are violating too," she said sweetly. "Guess I'll need to inspect the whole street." It wasn't about the lawn. It was about making an example of me. Victoria wasn't just enforcing rules, she was rewriting them. and I was becoming her favorite target. Thursday morning, she stood at my door again, this time holding 2 paint swatches like sacred relics. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk about your front door," she said. "It's autumn sage. The approved HOA shade is forest sage." I blinked. "Are you serious?" "Consistency is critical," she said, eyes narrowing. "Property values depend on visual harmony. Your door threatens that." I almost laughed. The colors were identical to the naked eye, but she wasn't joking. She was savoring it. Her smile had sharpened into something surgical. "Attention to detail separates high-value neighborhoods from declining ones," she said, tone dripping with condescension. "And, frankly, Mr. Miller, you strike me as someone who doesn't pay attention. It wasn't about color. It was character assassination hidden beneath HOA jargon. And, for the first time, I realized Victoria wasn't enforcing a code. She was waging a personal war. That evening, I called my son Jake just to vent. He's 28 like me, but way more composed. He works as a 911 dispatcher, calm, under pressure, sharp as hell. I told him about the rose bush, the tape measure, the door color. At first he laughed, but then he went quiet. "Dad, I think I took a call about you. Earlier this week, a woman reported a suspicious middle-aged man digging in his yard. Said he might be burying something illegal. I felt my stomach drop. What address did she give, I asked, though I already knew. Yours." He sighed. "We had to send a patrol car, but they found you planting flowers. That's when it hit me. Victoria wasn't just harassing me with HOA nonsense. She was using emergency services as a weapon. And Jake, he had just become my inside man." The next morning, I noticed a patrol car cruising slowly past my house, then again that afternoon, and again the day after. Jake confirmed it. Victoria had submitted 3 more reports. Noise disturbance while I mowed the lawn at 2 p.m. Suspicious activity when I accepted an Amazon delivery. Possible drug exchange because a teenager rang my door to sell fundraiser chocolate. This wasn't random anymore, it was calculated. She was creating a paper trail, one false accusation at a time, trying to paint me as unstable, dangerous. So when the real confrontation came, she'd already built the narrative. Jake was furious, but I wasn't. I was patient, because while she was playing checkers with fear and intimidation, I was playing chess with facts and evidence. Victoria thought she was tightening the noose. She didn't realize I was already building the gallows. That weekend, I started digging into my home's purchase documents. Everything, every clause, every footnote. And then I found it. Buried in the original deed transfer was one critical detail. I hadn't bought my house from a private seller. I'd purchased it directly from the Maplewood Development Corporation, the original builders of the entire neighborhood. And the kicker, the developers had never officially transferred control of my lot to any HOA authority. Meaning Victoria and her precious HOA legally, they had no jurisdiction over my property. Not the roses, not the paint, not a damn thing. I leaned back in my chair staring at that clause like it was a loaded weapon. Every fine she'd issued me was void. Every regulation she threw at me meaningless. I wasn't just off the hook. I was outside the entire system. Now the only question was, how deep did her fraud go? From that moment on, I stopped reacting. No more arguments, no more questioning her citations. I simply nodded, smiled, let her feel powerful, because I wasn't fighting back. I was collecting. I set up high-definition security cameras on every corner of my property, bought cloud storage, time-stamped everything. Each time Victoria came by with her smug smile and empty threats, I hit record. Each warning taped to my door became part of a growing archive. Each infraction documented down to the minute. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because I'd spent years in the military learning one thing. You don't win by shouting. You win by letting your enemy reveal who they really are. And Victoria. She was doing that perfectly. All I had to do was sit still and let her hang herself one clipboard citation at a time. A week later, a thick white envelope appeared in my mailbox. The seal was stamped with the Maplewood HOA insignia. Inside was a folded letter, formal, theatrical, and absolutely ridiculous. Subject: Emergency Community Meeting. Agenda: The Miller Problem. The phrasing hit me like a punch. Not a concern, not a misunderstanding, a problem. Apparently, my pattern of non-compliance had undermined the community's integrity and cohesion. They were inviting all residents to attend a mandatory session to discuss possible disciplinary actions, including additional fines and enforcement measures. I stared at the paper. She wasn't hiding anymore. This wasn't about rules, it was about reputation. She wanted to destroy mine in front of every neighbor I hadn't even met yet. A public hanging Maplewood style. But what Victoria didn't know was that I'd already loaded the gallows, and I wasn't the one who'd be standing on the platform. By the next morning, that same letter had landed in every mailbox on the block. She didn't just send it to me. She sent it to the entire neighborhood, 35 households, like I was some public health threat. I watched from my porch as neighbors walked to their mailboxes, read the headline, and looked straight at my house. Whispers started. Doors closed faster, and there she was, walking proudly down the sidewalk, emerald blazer. Crisp clipboard in one hand, coffee in the other. She smiled like a politician on a campaign trail. Calculated. Performative. She wasn't just enforcing a meeting, she was manufacturing a mob. The letter even included bullet points. Evidence of sustained disregard for community values. Refusal to comply with repeated guidance. Potential legal actions pending. It was all fiction. But when fear and authority wear a blazer and heels, most people don't ask for proof. They just nod and fall in line. I called Marcus that night. Old friend. Former Navy JAG officer. Now a real estate attorney with a killer instinct and a wicked sense of justice. We'd served together overseas. He knew how to keep calm under fire and how to return it twice as hard. I laid out everything: the fines, the false reports, the citations, the meeting. Then I told him about the clause I found in my deed. Silence. Then his voice low and sharp. "You're not under HOA jurisdiction at all." "Not even close," I said. He exhaled, slowly, already calculating. "Then this isn't harassment anymore, David. It's impersonation. It's fraud. Possibly criminal." I could hear the click of his keyboard through the phone. He was already digging. "You hold your ground," he said. "Don't argue. Don't flinch. Let her keep going. Trust me, people like Victoria always overplay their hand." And I believed him, because I knew exactly the kind of war we were in. Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when I heard tires crunch across my driveway. I looked through the blinds and froze. Victoria had returned, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a locksmith toolbox in hand, looking uncomfortable but resigned. She marched to my front door like she owned it, a leather folder tucked under her arm. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Miller," she announced, voice clipped and official, under Section 12.4 of the HOA's emergency compliance powers. "I'm authorized to secure properties that pose immediate threats to community standards." She pulled out a printed notice, brandishing it like a court order. "Your locks will be replaced. You'll receive new keys upon full compliance." I said nothing, just stepped aside and hit record on my phone, because right then, Victoria didn't realize, she'd just committed felony trespass on camera. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I stood there silent, recording, watching Victoria direct the locksmith like a commander on a battlefield she thought she'd already won. She pointed, gave orders, handed over that ridiculous document like it held the weight of law. The locksmith avoided eye contact. His hands moved fast, mechanical, nervous. When the final click echoed the sound of my own front door locking me out, I smiled. Not because I was defeated, because the moment was perfect. I called Marcus immediately, told him everything. He burst into laughter. "David, you just got the best legal gift imaginable." She forced entry. She changed your locks. She fabricated legal authority on private property outside her jurisdiction. That's 5 federal violations minimum. Document it all. Then we bury her legally. And that's exactly what I planned to do, because I hadn't lost my home. I'd just weaponized the battlefield. That same afternoon, I checked into a nearby hotel. But before I left, I mounted 2 new motion-activated security cameras, one facing the front yard, the other covering the driveway. Both streamed to a secure cloud. I wasn't just documenting now. I was building a timeline. Every time Victoria stepped onto my property, waved a citation, or just strutted past with her signature smirk, the camera caught it. I even installed a mic near the mailbox to capture audio. Then I started organizing at all dates, times, statements, contradictions. Victoria had no idea that every smug word, every staged performance was now evidence. She thought she was tightening her grip, but really she was sinking into a trap of her own design. Because I wasn't just going to prove she had no authority, I was going to show exactly how far she'd gone to abuse it. And I was just getting started. It didn't take long before others started talking. It began with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow 3 houses down who always smiled but never lingered. She caught me one morning near the mailbox, her voice barely above a whisper. She charged me $75. For leaving my newspaper on the porch for 15 minutes while I was in the bathroom, she said, eyes darting toward Victoria's house. 15 minutes, David. Her hands trembled. Later that day, Tom Johnson, mechanic mid-40s, tough as nails, confided in me behind his garage. She wrote me up for washing my car at 10 a.m., said it violated quiet hours. At 10 in the morning. I started keeping track. Story after story, petty fines, threats of lawsuits, backhanded warnings. People weren't just frustrated, they were afraid. Victoria had turned the HOA into a weapon, and she used fear as her currency. But now that silence was beginning to crack. The real break came when I followed the money. With Marcus's help, we pulled HOA financial records public under state law. What we found wasn't just shady, it was outrageous. Victoria had created a company called Maplewood Property Management Services 18 months ago. The HOA, our HOA, had been paying this company $5,000 a month for compliance consulting. No contracts, no oversight, no board vote. She was quite literally paying herself $60,000 a year using neighborhood funds without anyone knowing. That wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. I brought the files to Tom Wilson, a retired civil engineer and longtime resident. His face went pale. She's turned our HOA into her personal ATM, he muttered. Now the stories made sense. The fines, the threats, the fear. They weren't about order, they were income. Victoria wasn't protecting the community, she was exploiting it, and I had the receipts to prove it. That night, Marcus called again, and his voice was electric. David, I just came back from the county courthouse. You won't believe this. He'd pulled every HOA filing, every leadership transition, every election record since Maplewood was established. And guess what? There was no record, none of Victoria Harlow ever being elected HOA president. Not even a vote. 3 years ago, the previous president moved to Florida. Victoria just stepped in, declared herself in charge. No documentation, no board approval, no community consent. She printed her own titles, drafted her own rules, paid herself with our dues. It wasn't leadership, it was a hostile takeover in broad daylight, and everyone just assumed she was legitimate because she spoke with confidence and wore a blazer. Now, I didn't just have legal grounds, I had proof of fraud impersonation and misappropriation. The mask was cracking, and I was going to be the one to rip it off. I needed one final push, a trigger she couldn't ignore. So I walked to the center of my front yard and planted a single bright yellow sunflower. Deliberate, centered, bold. I knew exactly what that color would do to her. Victoria had an obsession with uniformity, and yellow was her favorite target. She once fined a neighbor for a yellow garden gnome. This was a flare gun. Sure enough, the next morning I heard her heels clacking down the sidewalk. clipboard in hand, rage barely concealed beneath her lacquered smile. She stood at the edge of my yard like I'd burned the HOA charter itself. "Mr. Miller, you are now in violation of Section 7.2 Unauthorized Botanical Installations." I looked at her dead calm. "Then I'm sure you'll be including it in the meeting." She blinked, hesitated, and I knew right then she'd just walked into my arena. She came back that afternoon storming up the walkway like a storm in heels. This time, no fake politeness, no forced smile, just fury. She thrust a citation into my chest. "You've now violated Section 7.2.2, she snapped. "Yellow flowering plants are explicitly prohibited in front yard landscaping. This infraction carries a $500 fine, effective immediately." I took the paper slowly, studying the wording, the phony official seal she loved stamping on everything. "I'd like to see the meeting minutes where this rule was approved," I said calmly. That did it. Her jaw clenched, her cheeks flushed. "I don't need to show you anything," she barked. "I am the HOA president. My decisions are final." Her voice cracked just slightly, the control slipping, and for the first time, I saw it. Not power, fear. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when, or how hard it would hit. I held her gaze steady and unshaken. "Victoria," I said, my voice even. "Surely you have documentation. Voting records, meeting notes. Anything that shows residents approved this regulation." She blinked once, twice. Something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation. Then she laughed. But it was hollow, forced. "Regulations are established by executive authority. There's no need for community input on updates." I took a slow step forward. "You mean your authority?" She stiffened. "Mr. Miller, your defiance is bordering on harassment. I suggest you tread carefully." There it was again, veiled threat's empty power, but her voice had lost its edge. The cracks were spreading. She turned on her heel and walked away faster than usual, her clipboard held tight like a shield. And in that silence left behind, I could feel it. The ground beneath her was shifting, and she was starting to feel it too. 2 days later, I received a letter from her lawyer, a cease and desist, claiming I was intentionally disrupting community operations, harassing board leadership, and damaging the social cohesion of Maplewood. The irony nearly made me laugh. She was accusing me of harassment. After months of weaponized citations, fabricated reports, and unlawful lock changes. Marcus reviewed the letter and smirked. "This is a bluff, David. An aggressive, desperate one. She's trying to scare you into silence before the meeting." I nodded. It was textbook cornered manipulators always double down. But I wasn't backing down. We drafted a formal response, and in it, Marcus included a polite but firm request for full HOA documentation, meeting minutes, election records, financial disclosures. We gave her 5 business days. No more games. If she wanted a legal fight, she was going to get one. And this time it would be in front of everyone. Enough was enough. So I took it public. I drafted a formal request for an emergency community meeting, signed it, and submitted it to the HOA mailbox, copying every resident in the neighborhood. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. "We deserve transparency," I wrote. "We deserve to see the rules we're being punished by, and the people who claim the right to enforce them." Within 48 hours, over half the residents RSVP'd. Some curious, some angry, but most just tired. Tired of fines, tired of walking on eggshells, and most of all tired of Victoria Harlow acting like she owned the street. The meeting was set for Friday night 7 p.m. at the community hall, and this time I wasn't the one on trial. I was bringing receipts, and the Queen of Maplewood was about to face her crowd. Friday night. The community center buzzed like a courtroom before a verdict. 45 chairs lined up, every single one filled. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months were now whispering, eyes flicking toward the front of the room. And there she was, Victoria Harlow. standing behind a long table draped in a white cloth flanked by her signature emerald blazer and that cursed clipboard. She'd even set up a projector, a full slideshow presentation titled Maintaining Standards, the Miller Case Study. Printed handouts at every seat, photos of my yard, my door, my sunflower. She opened with the tone of a prosecutor. Tonight, we address a threat, not just to rules, but to harmony. Every word was dripping with moral authority perfectly rehearsed. To her, this wasn't a meeting, it was a stage, and she thought she was the star, but she didn't realize her spotlight was about to burn her alive. When she finished her slideshow complete with red arrows, bold fonts, and dramatic pauses, she turned to me with a smug tilt of her chin. Mr. Miller, would you like to explain why you believe your personal preferences outweigh community standards? I stood up slowly, calm, collected, connected my laptop to the projector, black screen, white text. First slide, California State Law. HOA, Governance, and Regulation A Changes. The room fell silent. According to state law, I began, any HOA regulation must be approved by at least 60% of homeowners with 30 days written notice. No exceptions. I scanned the crowd. Can anyone here recall receiving such notice? Attending such votes? Silence. Eyes began to shift. Some looked confused, others angry. I turned back to Victoria. Can you provide the voting records, Victoria? She opened her mouth, then closed it, for the first time that night. She had no words. I clicked to the next slide. A scanned invoice. Bold numbers. Company name, Maplewood Property Management Services. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a payment record, I said clearly. $5,000, paid monthly, not to a contractor, not to a vendor, but to a private company founded, owned, and run by Victoria Harlow. Gasps rippled through the room. Whispers turned to murmurs. Chairs shifted. Over the past year, she has paid herself $60,000 from your HOA dues, without approval, without disclosure, without a single vote. I turned to the audience. Check your own statements. It's all there. Victoria's face flushed red. This is a smear campaign, she hissed. An attack against the board. You are the board, someone muttered from the back. She spun around. But the room was no longer hers, the tide had turned, and the queen was cornered. Before she could recover, another voice cut through the room. Clear, calm, steady. My name is Jake Miller. I'm David's son, and I work as a 911 dispatcher for the city. Heads turned. All eyes landed on him, young composed, standing at the back in uniform. Over the past 3 weeks, I've personally handled 12 emergency calls placed by Victoria Harlow, all reporting suspicious activity at my father's address. We dispatched officers every time, and every single time they found nothing. He paused, voice unwavering. Lawn mowing at 2 p.m., receiving a pizza, a delivery from Amazon. None of it warranted police involvement. Her calls weren't for safety. They were for harassment. The room fell utterly silent. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out, because for once even she knew there was no spin, no rescue, and no more power behind her clipboard. What followed wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Neighbors began speaking quiet at first, then stronger. Mrs. Patterson stood, voice trembling but firm. She fined me for leaving my porch light on overnight, said it violated light pollution standards. I paid out of fear. Tom Johnson added, she threatened to sue me over a flag I hung for Memorial Day. One by one, the stories poured out citations, threats, humiliations. Victoria stood frozen, her emerald blazer now looking less like armor and more like a costume. Someone motioned to call a vote. Within minutes, hands went up, dozens of them. Unanimous. Victoria Harlow was officially removed from any role related to HOA leadership, and pending investigation charges would follow. She stormed out without a word. No clipboard, no glare, just silence. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in months, the room exhaled. Together. That night, I returned home. My own front door unlocked, unbothered mine again. No citations taped to the mailbox. No threats hiding behind hollow smiles. Just silence. Peace. Victoria's reign had ended not with noise, but with truth. And truth, when backed by patience, evidence, and community, is louder than any clipboard or fake authority. Because here's the truth. No one, not a neighbor, not a title, not a self-proclaimed leader has the right to invade your home, destroy your property, or insult your name. Dignity is not up for debate. And the law. It still matters. What you build with your hands and protect with your heart should never be subject to someone else's ego. Let this story remind us. Knowledge is power. Justice is patient. And courage when shared is unstoppable. If this victory felt satisfying, if it made you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more true stories where the good don't just survive. They win. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.